If you look at the coronation footage, you'll see that everyone bows and curtsies to the king, and no one moves a limb, a muscle, when Camilla passes. And that was because they were angry with Camilla.
Windsor has just been rocked by another behind-the-scenes earthquake, and this time, Queen Camilla is reportedly right at the center of the storm. Fresh leaks surrounding a major royal procession are raising suspicions that behind the palace's poised facade lies a high-stakes power struggle between Camilla, Prince William, and Catherine. The tension reportedly stems from Catherine's overwhelming public appeal, but just days before the ceremony, William allegedly uncovered a glaring anomaly regarding his wife's designated place in the procession lineup. Rather than letting the issue erupt immediately, William quietly escalated crucial evidence to King Charles III, and the king's subsequent reaction reportedly left insiders stunned. While Camilla stepped into the procession brimming with confidence, believing everything had been flawlessly arranged, Charles and William were seemingly waiting for the decisive moment to flip the board. What evidence did William present that was powerful enough to shift Charles's stance so abruptly? And what truly unfolded mid-procession as Camilla stepped into a role she believed was entirely untouchable? The radiant spotlight of the British royal family had never been distributed equally or peacefully. Following the grand coronation in May 2023, despite having officially claimed the title of Queen Consort beside King Charles III, Camilla remained perpetually haunted by an invisible yet gaping void that ultimate power could never fill the unadulterated embrace of the public. To her, every round of applause and every camera flash served as a vital metric of the legitimacy she had spent more than half a lifetime striving to secure. Yet the true custodian of both the media's heart and the devotion of millions across the realm was Catherine, Princess of Wales. Ever since stepping into the royal fold in 2011 with her effortless grace and almost flawless decorum, Catherine had always been the focal point of every gaze. The more Camilla watched Catherine stand radiant and poised beside William, the steadfast, formidable Prince of Wales carrying the weighty mantle of a future king, the more a smoldering blend of insecurity and jealousy burned within her, tormenting her mind through one public engagement after another. 12 days prior to the solemn procession at Windsor Castle, a ceremony carrying profound symbolic weight that commanded the rapt attention of hundreds of global media outlets, that flame of envy raged entirely out of control. In this upcoming spectacle, the precise positioning of senior royals would define the entire live international broadcast frame. Standing beside a polished oak table laden with ceremonial schematics, Camilla could not stomach the prospect of the Waleses once again monopolizing the next morning's front pages. Her mind churned with cold calculations. Her gaze locked onto the procession diagram, where William and Catherine were slated to stride in unison immediately behind the king and queen. Under the subtle guise of optimizing ceremonial choreography, Camilla set about orchestrating an ingenious shift. Her fingers gripped a pencil, lightly marking the diagram, to displace Catherine backward, severing her from William's stride. Her scheme was not merely to dilute attention, but to cast Catherine into a blind spot, an obscured angle where prime broadcast cameras and long lenses would struggle to capture the princess's magnetic presence. She wanted the live feed anchored entirely upon her own central prominence, relegating Catherine to a dim marginal figure on the fringes of the ritual. Each deliberate stroke across the paper was a desperate bid to extinguish a brilliance she could never conjure on her own. Yet the abnormal disruption within the coordination team's documents could never elude William. Exceptionally attuned to the subterranean currents within the palace and driven by a fierce instinctual urge to protect his family, the Prince of Wales instantly deciphered the covert intent behind the revised notes dispatched to his office. Reading through the minutiae of the altered floor plan, William felt his chest tighten with simmering fury. He recognized full well that this was no technical mishap or oversight by the protocol department, but a calculated slight aimed directly at his wife's standing. Refusing to let the maneuver slip quietly into place, William sought out Camilla directly. The air between them instantly stiffened with suffocating tension. Within William's steady, unyielding gaze, there was not an inch of room for compromise or surrender. Standing tall with the unmistakable authority of the heir apparent, he unequivocally struck down every single modification she had painstakingly orchestrated. William's resistance was not merely a display of unbending resolve, it was a steely, unspoken reassertion of order. Catherine was his wife, his rightful and inseparable partner, and her rightful place beside him at the Windsor procession remained entirely inviolable. The fiery clash of wills between the resolute young prince and the calculating queen transformed the room into a silent battleground. Brought to an abrupt, unyielding halt, Camilla had no choice on the surface but to preserve the composed demeanor of a royal matriarch, yet her fingers clenching the fabric of her dress betrayed the swelling tide of bitter resentment within. William's unyielding defiance had not quenched her ambition. Rather, it only drove her burning envy to mutate into a far more clandestine and perilous design. The simmering rage bottled up after the fiery clash with William did not deter Camilla. Instead, it stoked an unyielding obsession with power and standing. Behind locked doors in her private quarters at Clarence House, the silence was so absolute that only the harsh scratching of a metal nib against heavy vellum could be heard. Camilla could not brook defeat at the hands of her husband's son. Yielding to a younger princess felt like nothing short of an implicit humiliation to the crown of queen consort. The dread of fading into public irrelevance, coupled with a deeply wounded vanity, drove her toward an unprecedentedly reckless gamble. Her fingers trembling with agitation, meticulously sketched an entirely new lineup diagram. This was no longer the subtle adjustment she had attempted before, but a brazen violation of ceremonial protocol. On the clandestine parchment, Camilla drafted a deliberate wedge between William and Catherine, opening a strategic breach directly behind the king, so she could insert herself prominently between them. By physically severing the Prince and Princess of Wales, she was certain that the cameras would have no choice but to capture her as the sole anchor of the procession, while Catherine would be exiled to the outer flank, isolated and obscured. Every heavily inked line marked another link in a calculated bid for prominence plotted down to the very last stride. To keep the scheme from leaking, Camilla entrusted the operation solely to her most devoted personal aide, a confidant of many years who understood every calculating glance from her mistress. The directive was delivered with absolute stealth. A forged schematic, complete with the authentic insignia and protocol department seals, was to be slipped into the official operational binder in the Windsor Castle protocol office just moments before the procession commenced. The swap was timed for the shift change of the ceremonial stewards, the exact blind spot when collective vigilance would lapse. Camilla believed that once the altered order became an 11th-hour fait accompli on paper, William would never dare disrupt a live broadcast before millions to dispute the formation, and Catherine would be forced into isolated compliance. Yet Camilla's unnatural silence following their initial confrontation was the exact signal that put William on high alert. The Prince of Wales understood palace intrigue and his stepmother's obstinacy far too well. He knew a figure like Camilla would never surrender her ambitions after a single warning. Anticipating a brazen breach of protocol right before the ceremony, William resolved not to rely on standard palace channels. He quietly instructed his personal security detail men, fiercely loyal only to him, to initiate a discreet surveillance operation. A miniature high-definition pinhole camera with a wide-angle lens was covertly embedded inside the air vent of the Windsor Protocol control room. This was the sanctum where final procession briefs were stored before being distributed to ceremonial officers and senior royals. William had anticipated the exact ground where the subversion would take place, waiting patiently for his invisible trap to spring. The hours leading up to the procession ticked away in suffocating suspense. Precisely as William had foreseen during the brief window when the control room sat completely deserted, the heavy oak door cracked open. Camilla's trusted aide slipped inside face taut, with nerves eyes darting about in acute suspicion. Every single movement, from the furtive approach to the central desk, the trembling fingers unlatching the confidential dispatch case, to the precise second the official protocol sheet was withdrawn and substituted with Camilla's altered blueprint, was captured in immaculate razor-sharp detail. The digital lens missed nothing: the nervous tremor in the hands, the fleeting smirk of triumph as the forged document settled into place, and the hurried concealment of the original file beneath a tailored coat. Every second of the clandestine swap cemented what was once a private vanity into indisputable proof of ceremonial sabotage. In the shadows of the technical monitoring room, the footage was extracted instantly and routed directly into William's hands, poised to become the definitive strike to dismantle the conspiracy once and for all. Clutching the memory card containing the razor-sharp footage alongside the two comparative schematics, William strode down the cavernous, endless corridors of Windsor Castle. Each decisive footfall, echoing across the marble floor, carried not only the fierce indignation of a husband defending his wife's honor, but the unyielding resolve of a future monarch confronting the erosion of courtly standards. He made straight for King Charles III's private study, where the monarch was adjusting his ceremonial military regalia ahead of the solemn procession. The heavy oak door swung shut completely, walling off the room from the bustling flurry of ceremonial officers outside. Without a single word of ornate preamble or unnecessary pleasantry, William placed a compact tablet and the two dossiers onto his father's mahogany desk. The video began to play. Silent yet damning frames unfurled the silhouette of Camilla's trusted aide infiltrating the operations room, hands covertly swapping the procession layout and the hurried tremor upon completing the illicit deed. Beside the screen, the two schematics lay flat before Charles, one bearing the authentic seals that preserved William and Catherine side by side, and the forged version altered to wedge the Queen Consort between them to isolate the Princess of Wales. As King Charles III's eyes locked onto the screen, his countenance shifted from detached contemplation to sheer disbelief, finally freezing into a state of deeply suppressed, frigid fury. The monarch's chest heaved beneath the metal-encrusted ceremonial tunic. The veins in the hand, gripping the edge of the desk, flared pale and taut. To Charles, this was no petty domestic squabble or the routine jostling for the limelight among palace women. This was an unlawful interference, a grave assault on the centuries-old royal protocol, something he, as the head of the Commonwealth, would never allow anyone to taint. The betrayal and blind maneuvering of his consort felt like a direct challenge to the supreme authority of the crown under the very roof of Windsor. Though wrath flared within Charles's mind, the seasoned discipline forged across decades of political tempests instantly pulled him back into a chilling composure. He did not summon Camilla for an immediate interrogation, nor did he ignite a chaotic brawl on the eve of the procession. A sudden explosion of temper would only derail the organizational machinery and grant the culprit room to feign ignorance or deflect blame. Instead, a strategic commanding directive took shape in the king's mind. Charles drew himself up, his piercing gaze settling upon his eldest son. He issued an exceptional, strictly confidential order, demanding that the commanding officer of the Royal Guards and the Internal Security Coordination Detail noted immediately throughout the entire procession route, William and Catherine were required to remain side by side, and not a single soul was permitted to cut in or alter the prescribed formation. The king granted the ceremonial guard full authority to intervene directly with strict protocol measures should any deviation occur in the ranks. With this weighty verbal decree, Charles effectively raised an impenetrable wall around the Prince and Princess of Wales, turning any attempt by Camilla to intrude into an open defiance of the sovereign's supreme command. Meanwhile, in another wing of the castle, Camilla was thoroughly enveloped in a cocoon of complacency and premature triumph. Seated before the vanity mirror, as dressers applied the finishing touches, her eyes sparkled with smug satisfaction upon receiving a discreet nod from her personal aide. She was entirely convinced that the document swap had proceeded without a flaw, and that once the forged blueprint was enforced by the stewards, she would step majestically into the center of every camera frame, without facing the slightest resistance. Blinded by envy, she was utterly numb to the brewing tempest, hanging heavy over the castle, wholly unaware that her clandestine deceit lay completely exposed and that an invisible trap of royal protocol had been laid directly in her path by the king himself. The triumphant blare of brass fanfares signaled the commencement of the grand procession at Windsor Castle. The air within the central quadrangle hung thick with majestic solemnity, gathering hundreds of international dignitaries, foreign ambassadors, and a battery of broadcast cameras beaming the event live to millions around the globe. The crimson carpet stretched grandly from the main gateway toward the chapel doors, mirroring the dazzling luster of dress uniforms, medals, and jewel-encrusted regalia. During the subtle transition of the ranks, Camilla felt a quiet rush of euphoria surge through her veins. She was utterly convinced that the forged schematic had worked its magic and that the ceremonial choreography was unfolding entirely according to her clandestine design. Maintaining a practiced, haughty smile, she lifted the hem of her dark velvet gown and stepped forward with absolute confidence. Instead of holding her designated perimeter besides the king, she swept across the breach, angling decisively toward the space between William and Catherine. Her intent was transparent to the millimeter: seize the physical center, sever the unified front of the Waleses, and banish Catherine into the dead zone of the main television lenses. Yet the very second Camilla poised to plant her foot into the usurped position, an incident unprecedented in modern royal ceremonial history unfolded. King Charles III abruptly ground to a dead halt. The sovereign's sudden sharp standstill sent a seismic shockwave through the ranks. The entire retinue of dozens behind him froze on military instinct, their marching steps cutting off in unison to leave a suffocating silence across the expanse of the courtyard. Hundreds of eyes from global statesmen and the full array of camera lenses instantly converged upon the king. Without the slightest trace of hesitation, King Charles III turned with formidable absolute authority. His gaze, cold as glacial ice, locked onto Camilla, who stood caught off balance mid-stride in the ranks. With a single curt, decisive sweep of his hand and a look of unbending rebuke, the monarch openly signaled for the queen consort to fall back and return immediately to her original boundary. That wordless command carried the crushing weight of a sovereign decree, laying bare her irregular maneuver right before high-ranking dignitaries and dozens of live, zero-latency camera feeds. In that instant, the blood drained entirely from Camilla's face. The imperious smile froze, instantly replaced by sheer horror and bottomless humiliation as the reality of a public reprimand sank in. Her eyes widened in stunned disbelief, her trembling fingers clutching violently at the seams of her mantle to steady her shattered pride. Beneath the king's piercing scrutiny and the gaze of the watching world, with no room left for pretense or excuse, Camilla had no choice but to take hesitant backward steps, shrinking into the bitter sting of disgrace. Simultaneously, the officers of the Royal Guard subtly shifted formation, erecting an invisible barrier that entirely precluded any further deviation. The moment protocol was restored, William stepped forward with serene, towering poise. The steadfast composure of the Prince of Wales instantly dissipated the suffocating tension that had gripped the courtyard. Moving directly to Catherine's side, his gaze radiated quiet resolve and absolute solidarity. Amid the solemn grandeur of the procession, William reached out and clasped his wife's slender hand firmly in his own. That firm, rock-solid grip was far more than a gesture of protection. It was an unmistakable declaration of an unbreakable bond that no subterranean intrigue could ever fracture. Catherine lifted her chin, reclaiming her natural radiant grace as she matched her husband's confident stride. The procession surged forward once more to the majestic cadence of the brass advancing, straight toward the great portal of the chapel. The stark contrast between Camilla's pale, downcast silhouette trailing behind and the luminous regal unity of the Waleses commanding the international gaze turned the ceremonial moment into a fatal strike against vanity, setting the stage for the total collapse of the conspiracy waiting in the wings. The massive, intricately carved oak doors of the chapel's reception hall swung shut, sealing off the solemnity of the ceremony and the prying eyes of hundreds outside. The atmosphere shifted instantly, morphing from polished royal decorum into the stifling tension of an informal tribunal. The grand chamber, lined with ancient tapestries, suddenly felt claustrophobic beneath the sheer weight of a confrontation among those who held the dynasty's destiny in their hands. The fury bottled up throughout the procession erupted violently within Camilla. Her chest heaved beneath her lavish gown, her face flushed crimson from the searing humiliation she had just suffered before millions of broadcast viewers. Casting aside every shred of courtly restraint, she strode furiously toward King Charles III, her eyes blazing with raw resentment and bitter indignation. Her lips trembled, and her slender, diamond-ringed fingers jabbed accusingly at her husband, every movement reeking of the outrage of someone convinced she had been deliberately betrayed and disgraced. To Camilla, the king's abrupt halt mid-procession was nothing short of a direct slap to the honor and status of queen consort, a position that had cost her half a lifetime to claim. Yet Camilla's tempest crashed against a wall of ruthless, chilling silence from Charles. The king stood resolute beside the marble hearth hands, clasped behind his back, his eyes regarding her, without the faintest trace of pity or warmth. The eerie composure of the monarch caused Camilla's aggressive momentum to falter, a creeping sense of dread slowly taking root in her chest. At that very moment, William stepped forward, cutting through the impasse with cold finality. Without a wasted motion, the Prince of Wales placed the compact tablet onto the central marble table, laying the two ceremonial dossiers flat beside it. With a single deliberate tap of his finger, the screen flared to life, replaying the surveillance footage in pristine definition. Every passing second of the video struck like a blade, stripping away the last layers of Camilla's facade. On screen, the unmistakable silhouette of her most trusted aide crept into the protocol office, picked open the confidential dispatch case, and substituted the lineup schematic in broad, undeniable clarity. Flanking the display, the original royal blueprint bearing the official seals lay directly alongside the forged copy, with its deliberate alterations meant to sever William and Catherine, twin pillars of unyielding, irrefutable evidence. Every protest choked in Camilla's throat. The flush of fury drained rapidly from her face, leaving an ash-pale complexion, as her dilated eyes remained glued to the moving images on the screen. Her knees buckled, her body swaying so unsteadily that she was forced to grip the back of a nearby velvet armchair to keep from collapsing. The unraveling was absolute and total. The entire scheme she had painstakingly plotted, believing it was shielded in flawless secrecy, had in truth been monitored by her adversaries from its very inception. Camilla's humiliation reached its zenith as King Charles III let out a quiet sigh and approached the table. The look he cast upon her was no longer one of fleeting anger, but the profound, crushing disappointment of a sovereign who recognized that a sacred boundary of honor had been breached. With a curt brush of his hand over the forged papers, Charles laid bare a brutal truth. He had possessed this evidence hours before the procession had even begun. His earlier silence, refraining from confronting her in his private study and allowing the drama to play out in the courtyard, had been a deliberate test. He had let Camilla march straight into the snare, sprung by her own envy, allowing her transgression to expose itself in the starkest light imaginable before the watching world. That bitter revelation utterly leveled the final remnants of Camilla's pride. The grand chamber plunged into a graveyard, silence broken only by the choked, ragged breaths of a woman who had just realized she had not merely failed to seize the spotlight, but had dealt a fatal blow to her own credibility, trust, and standing within the royal house. The aftermath of the Windsor Castle incident did not unfold with screaming matches or sensational debates, but fell with the cold, systematic, and absolute finality of royal discipline. That very night, an internal directive with immediate effect was issued by the Sovereign Executive Office. Camilla's most trusted aide, the direct operative in the document forgery, was instantly stripped of all palace clearance, relieved of royal service credentials, and escorted permanently off the palace grounds under the silent gaze of the household staff. The swift dismissal of her right-hand confidant served as the first steely warning to the queen consort that her realm of privileged impunity had drawn to a close. In the days that followed, Camilla's footing within the palace power structure crumbled beyond repair. Under King Charles III's unyielding approval, a sweeping curtailment of her ceremonial prerogatives was ruthlessly enacted. Camilla's name steadily vanished from prestigious military patronages, her authority to intervene in ceremonial committees was completely revoked, and most critically, an unwritten yet ironclad decree was established. Camilla was strictly barred from sharing the frame or co-headlining major diplomatic engagements, alongside William and Catherine. Each revised itinerary delivered to her desk featured only minor charitable functions, stripped of cameras, devoid of global press, and entirely segregated from the corridors of power. Camilla's pride was systematically crushed day by day. Seated within the cavernous halls of Clarence House, watching the deference of courtiers who once catered to her every whim morph into wary, distant, and frigid politeness, she felt the suffocating grip of isolation close in. Every overture to explain herself or seek solace from Charles was met with closed doors and impeccably polite rebuffs from private secretaries. The husband, who had once braved storms of public outrage on her behalf, now prioritized the inviolable sanctity of the crown and the future of the monarchy above all else. The definitive turning point arrived at last. Arrangements were made for Camilla to spend the vast majority of her time at Ray Mill House, her private country retreat in rural Wiltshire, a residence physically severed from the beating pulse of London and Windsor. Her retreat from the royal centre was never formally branded an exile in order to preserve the public dignity of the throne, yet every palace insider understood it as a quiet banishment for a consort who had squandered every ounce of trust. Standing by the window overlooking the desolate grounds of her distant estate, Camilla bitterly grasped the catastrophic toll of her jealousy. Her grand ambition to stand forever at the epicenter of the spotlight had terminated in profound solitude within silent walls. In stark contrast to Camilla's retreat into the shadows, the stature of William and Catherine shone brighter and more formidable than ever. In every subsequent public appearance, the Prince and Princess of Wales walked in seamless unity, exuding poise, confidence, and an unbreakable bond. William's steadfast gaze toward his wife paired with Catherine's radiant warm elegance as she embraced the adoration of tens of thousands lining the streets stood as the living testament to the enduring continuity of the crown. Having weathered covert machinations and base schemes of division, the solidarity and authentic love of the Waleses had not merely safeguarded their personal honor, but underscored an enduring truth of the court. True brilliance is born of dignity and integrity, and it can never be stolen through deceit. After following this story, do you think the heaviest price Camilla paid for her envy was the loss of her royal privileges or the complete forfeiture of King Charles III's trust and respect? In a sea of videos, I am so glad YouTube managed to bring this one to you. We pour a tremendous amount of care into researching every single detail of these royal histories. I know using a TV remote takes a little extra time, but your likes and subscriptions are the ultimate motivation for our team to keep creating careful, high-quality stories for your screen. Thank you so much for your support.